As you probably heard, the best time to plant a tree is 50 years ago. But failing that, you should plant that tree today. Well, on the topic of sensible investing and doing impactful things with your life, we have Tim Draper on the show. Tim is one of the most successful investors of our time and a multi-billionaire. He was an early investor and often the first investor in some huge companies today, such as Skype, Hotmail, Tesla, SpaceX, Twitch, Robinhood, Baidu, and Carter, as well as 15 other unicorn businesses, as well as buying an absolute mountain of Bitcoin many, many years ago, which he bought off of the federal government, which had seized it off the website Silk Road. And when I said he bought a mountain, I mean he bought 30,000 Bitcoin, which given today's current price, as I'm recording this, which is $34,000, that is exactly $1 billion worth of Bitcoin that he currently holds. Not only is he one of the most successful investors of our time, he also set up Draper University, which goes against the standard education system of written memory and celebrating correct answers only, and instead focuses on effort and celebrating mistakes, failures, and how that can lead to learning. And so Draper University is a true hub of growth mindset thinking, and it has genuinely created some hugely successful entrepreneurs and artists, and I'm sure there'll be many more that come out of it. Tim is without a doubt a capitalist who believes good work and good solutions come about from the right incentives, and he has some very interesting views worth contemplating at least. On the show today, we dive into the incentive issues of socialism and creating the mindset for success and future thinking. We learn how Tim thinks about the future as an investor and why he has been able to have such success as an investor and outperform all indexes, as well as some useful frameworks around entrepreneurship, risk-taking, and of course, his lessons from reinventing the education system to make it better at developing growth mindset thinking. Tim was a truly incredible guest, and you're going to love his stories and lessons. So besides a short comment about the fact that I have a very deep voice today because I am quite ill, I got some kind of infection in a river here in the Himalayas, where I am currently based for 3 months. The interview was recorded before I came here, so don't worry, I'll be talking fine. And moving on, we will kick off with a story from Tim's first entrepreneurial venture as a child, and the many failures that it suffered, and how those lessons and mindsets set him up for his attitudes today and his thinking and success since then.
There's a lot to my childhood. I grew up with a great mom and a great dad and 2 great sisters and a neighborhood that was a lot of fun. I also grew up a little entrepreneurial. I may have been 10 years old, and I picked apples from our tree and sold them out on the street. And this is one thing that sort of sticks with me. I spent about 2 weeks doing this, selling apples on the street. I charged 5 cents an apple. And some friends would come and go, and they'd visit and say, "What are you doing here?" And, they'd sit with me for a little while. And then one day, I was just about finished. One of my friend's mother comes up and says, "How much have you made?" And I said, $8. She said, "Oh, okay, hand me that $8. So I give her the $8. And she says, "Okay, who helped you with this?" And there were people around. And I said, "What do you mean, who helped me?" "Well, who else was here?" "Well, he was and he wasn't." She hands out 5 of the dollars to each of them, gives me $1, takes the other 2 herself, and leaves. And I went, huh. So that was my first experience with socialism, and I realized it does not work. It does not incentivize you to do work. And so I've been a capitalist all my life. I've been very driven by the idea that you can spread a good product around the world. That made a big impact on me. I did a lot of chores for my own family, but also for other families growing up. So I actually do believe that kids should do work, but not 8 hours of work, but they should mow the lawn, pull the weeds, or paint the house, or build a sandbox, or whatever. I think those things are good as long as they're getting paid for it.
Yeah. I remember sort of mowing the lawn for my dad and stuff and earning like £1 and doing chores and things. And something I have thought about since is how quickly your mind changes in terms of the concept of money, from like how much like that $8 meant to you back then compared to sort of now. Like you wouldn't even blink if you happen to have $8 less in your wallet, sort of a moment kind of thing. And at the point where you get to dealing with sort of millions and billions and things, it's like a shift every single time that you're going up. And I mean, I remember then earning like £5 an hour when I became like a lifeguard, and then starting my first business, and then getting to the point where you sort of be able to deal with like millions. It's still one thing I kind of think about is like, why does it sort of stress me out at this level so much when I'm sure in 10 years time I'm going to be kind of 5 times higher, and what I'm now stressed about won't even matter to me at all, and trying to sort of think further ahead.
Well, you don't want to spend further ahead. You still want to be careful with that $8. When I did the chores, my mom paid me a penny a minute. And so that was 60 cents an hour. Didn't quite get up to a dollar an hour, but every penny meant something to me. Probably still does in some distant way. But don't spend to the future. If you think you're going to be successful, you want to spend to what you got in the bank. I feel like governments really need to do that too, is say, what do we have here? What can we do with it? How do we improve the world with it? But not like, what can we get away with spending in anticipation of a lot of money coming in?
Yeah, you don't want to take the mindset of like just spending loads of money. And I think a lot of people who are rich actually just keep quite a sort of reserved mindset on like using clothes that are getting old and stuff. I meant more as in thinking of ways to make money and how to operate more, because it used to be that you wouldn't become a startup investor until you're like a millionaire, but then actually that's one of the best ways to make money and like put your capital to growth. Sort of like the ways that are now becoming open to people to kind of actually grow their money, even if it isn't huge, I think is an interesting mindset that sort of investors have had for a while, but like other people maybe haven't had.
I've been trying for years to see how we can get the individual investor to be able to participate in private equity, private stocks, the venture capital, that kind of thing. And I was pretty excited when the U.S. created the crowdfunding rules, because suddenly we were able to do that. So that was a big deal for me. And we backed a bunch of crowdfunding companies. And I do believe the same thing in that when you're just getting going, you got to be willing to and able to take risks with your money. But there's a lot of buyer beware out there. You got to make sure you do things fully informed.
Yes, and not just being like, cool, people become millionaires by investing in these companies. I'm just going to invest in any company that went through YC or something. It's people can kind of get a bit too excited and not actually understand that maybe you need to invest in 100 companies to still do some due diligence.
YC and Boost and a number of these others have really brought a lot of interesting companies together, and there is a filter to what they do. So you could do very well if you invest in some of those companies. Some of those accelerators are better than others. But I've always had good luck and good success with the companies I've backed at Boost VC, at YC, a little bit at Techstars, Alchemist, Amplify. There have been a lot of these accelerators who have put together good teams of people. And actually, Draper University, as our school, has been like a great accelerator for us. Meet the Drapers, our show, has become a big source of deal flow for us. And some of those companies have really taken off. So I would, as an investor, look for those vehicles that filter down your options to the ones that are serious and important.
Definitely. I guess you obviously get asked for investment advice a lot, but one thing I'd be interested in is what are the mindsets that you look for in the entrepreneurs that you're investing in that sort of means they're going to be the ones that build Robinhood, SpaceX, etc.?
So our first filter is really on market size and how big a company could get if they were successful, and whether the technology has a wedge into that market so that they can find some customers and then start growing from there, because building customers is really what it's all about. The mindset is customer bias. That's very important. Most of the really, really big companies that I back were all saying things like, this is how we're going to delight our customer. The other mindset, I think, is people do get a little bit afraid of getting too big. It's an odd thing, but when an entrepreneur goes out, some entrepreneurs are really happy to be a big fish in a small pond. We're looking for a small fish in a big pond. We're looking for people who are willing to spread their good word everywhere around the world and have the confidence to say, yeah, this is the way the world should go. The other thing that we look for, is it really unique? And uniqueness is very rare. It's very funny. Entrepreneurs all think that their idea is unique. But if you do a Google search on whatever that entrepreneur came up with, there are probably anywhere from 300 to 500 other people doing the exact same. And so I don't think you think you're the only podcast out there, but entrepreneurs who do and feel that what they're doing is particularly unique. We do look for that odd, unique thing. And if they have some wedge into the market, a simple product that gets into the market.
Then if you look at Skype, Tesla, sort of Angels at the time, Twitch, Robinhood, they were all pretty unique and sort of the first ones to try and do those things.
They were all crazy at the time, right? I mean, Skype, my partner said, these are two outlaws. They were part of Kazaa. Tesla, I mean, there hadn't been a successful car company created for 50 years. DeLorean was last effort, and that was a $20 million catastrophe. And so the idea of backing an electric car company was really nuts. Hotmail guys came to us with an entirely different idea. And then they were going to just give something away for free web-based email, and didn't have any business model planned at all when they came to us. So the other big winners, Robinhood, I was the 25th investor they came to, and they said they have quoted in press, Draper was the only one stupid enough to back Robinhood at the seed level. And so all of these companies, Coinbase, I mean, you're going to create a bank around Bitcoin, or you're going to make it so the retail community can use Bitcoin? It seemed crazy. Bitcoin itself was an odd thing at that time. It was like, what is this? It's a virtual money? And all of these things sounded a little crazy. Turned out they really worked out. And we've backed a lot of crazy things that didn't work out. So we're willing to do that because we know that when they do work out, the sky's the limit, or there is no limit in the case of SpaceX. I mean, imagine SpaceX. That was pretty wild and crazy. The idea, we're going to create a private space company. I mean, NASA was the last thing that ever happened in space, and that was when they went to the moon in 1964. I mean, creating a private space company, crazy nutty.
I guess to be a good investor, you kind of need to be thinking in the future, like 10 years ahead kind of thing. Do you think that means you struggle to be in the present?
I'm never in the present. I'm always in the future. You know, everybody I meet, they tend to be people who are telling me what the world's going to look like 5 to 10 years out. And so I have a pretty good view of what the world looks like 5 to 10 years out. I don't have a good view of pop culture or what the world looks like right now or any of that. I look for mega trends, and then I project out for 10 years and I say, okay, this is what I see happening. And then an entrepreneur will come in and blow me away and make my whole world view 5 years out change, because some entrepreneurs just have that ability. So that's what's fun about my job. I think I've got it all figured out, and then I realize I don't.
Definitely. What's been, I love mindset shifts where people kind of think you believe something for a long time and then something just arrives and you're like, oh my God, I've been wrong about this. Like, what's been something that you sort of were wrong about for a long time and recently changed your mind on?
Well, it wasn't that I was wrong about something and then changed my mind. It was like, I thought the use of a computer would be limited to word processing spreadsheets when I started. And the idea of a portable computer, portable phone was very remote when I was getting going. And now I push a button and a guy shows up with my dinner. I mean, this is a very different world than I ever imagined. So that was some combination of some of the great entrepreneurs in the world that made that all happen. And so as a venture capitalist, I have to always anticipate what might feel impossible to most people. So I have to sort of think, it may not be impossible. That may be possible. You know, in Europe, they use the word impossible all the time. That's a big mistake, because I have not really run into anything that was impossible.
On your example of your food turning up, my first business was a logistics company, and I actually was doing, this was 10 years ago, stuff just like Deliveroo, and we got really good traction on like independent restaurants and things. And I was pitching like McDonald's and Nando's, and they were just like, weren't having any of it. And like I eventually still managed to grow it and sell it, but I didn't build delivery. And sadly.
I'll give you another example. I always assumed that governance would be tied to physical space. So I always thought that the mayor of San Francisco would be just tied to the San Francisco space. But now I realize that governance is going virtual. And that came to me because I met with the president and prime minister of Estonia, and they made me the third virtual resident of Estonia. And I realized that there was going to be governance at the physical level, but then there was going to be governance at the virtual level. And that was even more important. And most of what government does right now and can do is and can be virtual. And so that doesn't really need to be tied to geographic restriction. And so I just met with a president of Palau, and he's making his country entirely digital. I believe he's going to make Bitcoin a national currency. I think he's going to create a whole new world to participate in that is where government services are virtual. And if you have government services being virtual, then they don't have all the overhead that they have in the physical world. And you can probably do a better job. That was another thing I didn't really expect, but now is out there.
Yeah, it makes lots of sense. And well, certainly places like Portugal are being pretty progressive with like sort of their visas, and like certainly Estonia and what they're doing with crypto. Spain's racing to do like a digital visa now for people to try and like catch up, because they're like, okay, everyone's going to Portugal and we'd like to have these rich people that have nothing to do with our country but just want to spend time in it. Like that would be good for them. And that makes a lot of sense. On the crypto side of things then, do you think we are just going to be completely banked on the blockchain?
I think the moment governments get the epiphany that they need to get, that they will be able to tax and be able to monitor businesses more easily with blockchain, they're going to make Bitcoin their national currencies too. I had to laugh when our government, the U.S. government, said, we're going to hire 500,000 more IRS agents. I was thinking, all you have to do is convert to Bitcoin and use crypto as your accounting system. And all of a sudden, all of that tax will be going to you automatically. What are you thinking? And it's like a bunch of old guys kind of come, and women do, but coming up with some rule where they're saying, oh, we've got to get those tax cheaters. I mean, all they have to do is automate the whole thing, and then they get their taxes. It's done. And so I think that they're kind of missing the boat, but once they see the epiphany and they go, oh my God, they might even give up the dollar for Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah, it's be painful having people being that stupid, but also the potential of it makes so much sense. So do you think it's, as like a price prediction, is going through the roof? Because I think you said it was going to be 250K by the end of this year.
Yeah, the end of this year or early next year will hit. I mean, that's my prediction, 250. I mean, once it's there, it may just be up from there, but I'm not going to make that prediction until this one's proved. But it's because there will be a moment when I can buy my groceries, my clothes, my housing, all with Bitcoin. And they'll probably do it on OpenNode or something. And the retailer will love it because they don't have to pay the banks 2.5% to 4% every time somebody swipes a credit card. Once that happens, I can get my food, clothing, and shelter in Bitcoin. Why would I ever hold any fiat currency? Why would I hold a currency that's tied to, fickle government that can print money whenever they want it? They will inflate, and then the value of the currency will continue to drop over time. Why would I do that when I can pull Bitcoin, and there are only 21 million of them, and that's all you'll ever have? And so why not just take all my money and put it into Bitcoin? As soon as I can get food, clothing, and shelter in Bitcoin, I don't see any reason to hold on to dollars. I have the feeling we're going to have a moment like when the dollars become like toilet paper. it's going to be one of those things like the Confederate dollar. When the Confederate dollar was no longer valuable, it was like people were trying to unload it. They were printing 1 million Confederate dollars or whatever. They were just printing and printing and printing to try to get people to use it or have it to have some value. But it's like, I wouldn't want to trade a euro for a drachma or a euro for a French franc right now, because there's no value to those. I see the same thing happening where to all the fiat currencies of the world, where Bitcoin specifically, and maybe some of the others, will be more sought after, and people won't want to hold on to the ones that are political. First ones to do it will be the Nigerian naira and the Argentinian peso and the Venezuelan bolivar.
Citizens are already trying to do it anyway. It's like having so many issues. That's certainly going to be a big shift in the world. So one thing I was wondering around is, when you get to the point of being like a billionaire, you're talking to governments and things, the same way that like money, when you have earning a few cents, it seems like there's like infinite amount of money in the world and like you never even have it. But like when the point, like the world seems much smaller when you kind of investing in companies that are like trying to get to space, you sort of know how governments are interacting and stuff. Do you kind of think about what you can credibly change in the world and feel that you can actually go and make a difference like this year, like quite easily?
Well, a lot of those are going to be out of my control. I've noticed that I feel that the unions in California have really destroyed the education system, and I'd love to see that improve, but they are an incredibly strong political force. In fact, all the U.S. has been weakened by government unions. I mean, private sector unions are great, but government unions are like socialism, and they don't work. I don't think the government employees are mining coal in the tunnels. They don't need to organize, but they do, and they get a better deal than the rest of the population. It used to be that we were the government, and the government worked for us. Now I feel like we work for the government, and we get Social Security, but the government gets pensions. We get Medicare, but the government gets medical benefits. Government is somehow rising to a higher class, and we are just grunt workers. So there is a problem there, at least in the U.S. Some of the other countries are rising up because they're realizing, hey, freedom works. And there's a time, South Korea, my dad fought in the Korean War, and there was this demilitarized zone between South and North Korea. North Korea was government control, government socialism, government communism. It was this country where the government took over and the dictator was whatever he said goes. And so the people have no freedom and no rights. Whereas in South Korea, the people have ultimate freedom. They're a democracy. They're an open system. They're a free market. They're capitalists. They're open borders. And now, 70 years later, that experiment is pretty complete, where the average South Korean makes 460 times what the average North Korean makes when adjusted for purchasing power. And the average South Korean is now 4 inches taller than the average North Korean. So, sure, you want socialism, you're going to starve. Go to North Korea. If you want capitalism, you're going to thrive because freedom works. And so that's the one thing I've really learned as I've gone around that with leaders, business people that are influential. But I've also learned that it's the entrepreneurs that really make the change. The politicians can identify those changes that need to be made, so they'll scream climate change. But the entrepreneurs are the ones that get drones to plant trees and put solar panels out there and do all that hard work.
Yeah, agree with everything you said. I went to North Korea back in 2018, and it was sort of pretty nuts to kind of see, like, if you remember, I'm quite short, and I was an extra large hoodie size out there, and I'm like, I've always been the smallest hoodie size ever, and it was totally nuts, and just interesting to see
this woman from North Korea who escaped, Yeonmi Park. She's about 4'2". I'm 6'4". She looks up at me and she said, "If I were in a free country, I'd be looking at you eye to eye." And then she said, "My government only allowed me to have 24 grains of corn for lunch. And they counted them out. 24 grains of corn, and that's what I got for lunch. And I thought, why is the government involved in what you're eating? When a government gets high and mighty and they think they should tell everybody what to do, they are going to make their people starve, lose education, lose quality of life, and lose out to the other governments that are freer.
There's some things around on capitalism that I think are problems around sort of the demand for attention, and just we maybe have too many options almost, and we actually kind of get into existential questions of how to be happy in different ways. And there's a lot more depression and suicide than there should be, considering the fact that we have all our bases covered and we have more food than we need and everything is technically fine.
Yeah. A lot of the depression and suicide has come from the lack of opportunity, and the lack of opportunity has come because our markets are not as free as they used to be. And so what you're seeing is the decline. You saw the rise of America during that time. There were very few suicides, as we're seeing a decline because we're losing our freedoms and we're not as focused on education and we're not as focused on business. That is when you start to see depression, suicide, homelessness. You didn't see that during the rise.
I had some other things I wanted to ask you, but just a random thought that just jumped in my brain on that. What would you do if you lost everything right now and no one knew who you were and you just had your wits, out of interest?
Well, since I know the venture business very well, I would probably jump back into the venture business. But if I were starting over and I were 22 years old, I would start thinking about how to create a virtual government, and I would build an entrepreneurial entity around a virtual.
Is there anybody working on that?
Yeah, a lot of people. There's a great one down in Honduras. The guys in Palau are working on one. There is one up in space. Space Chain actually is working on a virtual government. There are some 11 miles offshore in boats. And then various small island governments or various small governments around the world are all improving their services and competing for us, competing and improving and being accountable to their citizens and their virtual citizens. So yeah, it's happening in a lot of places.
In terms of you've kept your career in VC, but been a part of all these massive things, because you said you believe entrepreneurs can make a bigger difference. Have you felt like you could maybe delegate a lot of the change that you make through your investments in VC and be able to be more influential on the political side of things? Or have you just never wanted to get more involved than you already have because you seem to be talking to cool people already?
No, I have tried to get involved in political things. I created a school voucher campaign in 2000. I tried to break California into 6 parts and then 3 parts. And none of them worked because the power there is really in the hands of the bureaucracy and the union. And so things can't really change very easily. And so I think they need existential change to make them change. And so that's where you start to see virtual government start to take off. And then these other governments are going to have to sort of shape up and provide better service. I mean, that's their job. Provide better service to their citizens. So better education, better infrastructure, better waterways, better ways of dealing with crime. Nearly 1% of the U.S. population is locked up. And when I go into these prisons, I realize that many of these people who've been in there for, 5, 10 years, if they're cowed, they're not going to go out and do anything unless they need 3 square meals, and then they'll create a crime to come back. And the prisons are creating a better environment so that those people get better, so that when they come out, they're more valuable to society. There isn't a positive loop, and I think it has to do with the proper incentives. I don't think there are the right incentives for prison guards. That's even the wrong attitude. The prison guard shouldn't be the right attitude. It should be rehab or proper education or reprogramming, and give people a chance to get back out there and be productive members of society.
Definitely, it's reduces their options and gives them a giant network of other criminals. It's like the opposite of the two things that they need is some more opportunities and a chance to know people that can actually sort of help them do something else with their skills. Because so many people in prison actually are really entrepreneurial and maybe find it more difficult to have a normal job, like on the neurodiversity scale.
And the unions have a perverse incentive to get more prisoners.
Yeah. That's
so, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, besides talking about frustrating things, I mean, I love like the approach that you've taken with the Draper University around kind of throwing out the rule book of how to normally educate people and actually sort of making them do the opposite things. And yeah, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, that's worked really well. Schools have taken the safe route for years now, and that is to make everybody memorize everything and give them A's for not making any mistakes. And so at Draper University, we said, I will fail and fail again until I succeed. And that gives people an option to try new, and they've come out, and I think we've proven it. Our students have been extraordinary. We had the 3 guys who went off and created Quantum, the token. We had the guy who created Tron and then bought the Beeples painting. These are Draper University grads. We had a woman who figured out how to put a fiber line up the fallopian tube and detect whether there's cancer there without damaging the fallopian tube. She got FDA approval and sold her business for $275 million. And then we've had people who've come through who just, if they go join a big company, they get promoted much faster because they're willing to take change. About of the, 2,200, I think 800 businesses have been started. And we've had a bull market, so a lot of them have got funding and have been up to the races. And we have quite a few. And this is only a 10-year-old school. And we're already where Stanford and Harvard say, that 85% of their graduates go off and get a job. Our average graduate creates 5 jobs.
That's a bull stat right there. Nice. Yeah, I think you could die happy with just that, but you've done a million other things as well. That's awesome. Cool. I kind of want to go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you should go. It's fantastic. You will get reprogrammed.
I wrote recently around the concept of trying to have more failure in your life, because when you're raising money for a startup, a good funding round is 9 out of 10 people saying no. But we would resist things like that in so many other things. But let's say you're starting a podcast, people approach people that are definitely going to say yes, and so you're going to have like kind of average guests. But if you kind of try and aim for 90% of people to actually reject you, you're only going to go for like the ball of people, and then you get Tim Draper on your podcast, and life is awesome.
Go figure.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think definitely failing more is good.
Thank you, Sam, for having me on the show. I appreciate it. This has been great fun. I like your approach. So you get me thinking in ways I don't always think. Anyway, thank you so much. Sorry.
No, at all. Thank you so much for giving me your time. It's hugely valuable. So you're a legend. Take it easy. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Well, thank you so much for the investing wizard that is Tim Draper coming on the show. An absolute masterclass there on education, investing, and mindsets. I love the way that Draper University chose to just re-examine everything that's wrong with education and focus on building mindsets and principles to make students enjoy effort and risk-taking and build a growth mindset, a can-do attitude as opposed to a fear of being incorrect. Absolutely brilliant work. And as they say, those who think something is impossible shouldn't get in the way of those busy doing it. And Tim is head down investing in disruption and doing useful things that the world needs. It was a joy to have him on the show and bring those lessons to you, and I really hope you learned something. Now, one of the ways that the show grows, gets better, and gets bigger guests is by you, the listener, helping out by subscribing, commenting, and rating in Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. You may have heard this before, but if you liked the episode, please give me a giant ego boost by reporting publicly that you liked the episode a lot. This way, I can build valuable social proof that I'm doing something vaguely worthwhile with my time, and I might be able to fool other billionaires like Tim Draper to come and talk to me about things that you perhaps care about. So thank you very much, and a big hug from me for any support at all that you may subsequently provide having listened to my very useful message. And on that, have an epic week, and remember, life is to be enjoyed, which means working out how to enjoy every day as it's lived one day at a time and not putting enjoyment off for the future, because that's a fine way to struggle through life until it ends, because it does end. And you wouldn't want it to end without ever having the time to go and do the things that makes life great. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.